But I think it is a concern, especially for smaller businesses that don't have much data built up, and every conversion counts toward making decisions. It does make it more difficult for them.
The big thing under this data settings, though, is this data retention. So by default, the data retention is for 2 months. You more than likely want to change this to 14 months. So.
And it's worth noting that you can do this for other types of reports as well. So It's not just limited to Google Ads, but this is one of those things that if you need that quality of life, 100%, it's worth investing the 5 minutes at the onset than the several hours that you'll invest over time being frustrated and trying to find it, like where to go. So. Hey, everybody. Welcome to one of the most anticipated PPC Town Halls, GA4 discussion before the sunset. We are joined by two of the most brilliant minds when it comes to GA4, Brianna Anderson and Timothy Jensen. I'm Navah Hopkins of Optmyzr, and you are in for a power hour of insights, tips, tricks, and frankly, a little bit of calm before the storm. Let's get to it. Welcome to PPC Town Hall. I am delighted to be joined by the absolutely brilliant Brie Anderson and Tim Jensen. Do you guys want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes. No, I'm super excited to be here. I'm Brie Anderson. I have a consultancy called Beast Analytics, always repping the brand here. And in that analytics kind of consultancy world here, what we really focus on is empowering people to use their numbers, right? So really putting analytics into action, right? I've been working in GA4 since it came out in 2020. Fun fact, I was actually teaching a class on analytics at the time. The day before, I was like going through, because we were using like dummy sites. I was having people create dummy sites and stuff. And I went through the entire analytics setup and I was like, sweet. And then I got to the lecture and I started creating the analytics property, and it was like a G dash. And I was like, isn't that usually UA? And GA4 had rolled out that day. And so ever since then, I've been in the platform, and now I help people set it up and educate them and all that. So I've been well immersed in the GA4 world, despite everyone else hating it. I've kind of had to remind myself that just because they hate the platform doesn't mean that they hate me. They just don't like the platform. But that's okay. I totally get it. And I'm excited to talk with both of you today about kind of the good things about it, the things that people can do to make the transition a little bit easier, and all that fun stuff.
Fun fact, I met Brie giving an amazing session at Brighton SEO last year on GA4. And I have to say, what's really spooky is how predictive some of your insights are. So I'm really excited to get your take on a lot of the things. Tim, how about you? What's your affiliation with GA4?
Sure. Tim Jensen. I'm a senior search marketing strategist at M&T Bank. So I've been in-house for a little over a year now after 12 years on the agency side. So kind of seeing both sides of the world there. I've always been one to kind of geek out in the analytics end of the PPC world, always been big on GA. This also has been pretty timely as we've been working internally on kind of a build out of GA4 in process of transitioning away from Adobe Analytics. So kind of helping build a GA4 instance from the ground up here, as well as having worked through kind of at the beginning on the agency side when it first started switching over. So a big fan of the integrations with GTM, Google Tag Manager as well, and the customizations you can do through there. So yeah, excited to chat.
Well, that leads into one of our first questions, and I will just say, Tim, I am in love with your perspective. I often see on PPC chat, so thank you always for all that you share. Let's start with you. What do you love about GA4 and why? Like, what are some of the things that you're super excited about?
Sure. I know it's definitely been an adjustment for people to get used to how everything's kind of based on events in there. But I do love just how much customization you can use to build out events for anything and everything, and the ease in which you can turn those into conversions, turn those into an audience based on people that completed an event, like if they clicked a button on your site or completed a certain stage of the sign up process, whatever that might be.
And just in case folks aren't aware, event means
So event being basically an action that's taking place that can fire into the system. So that could be anything from they landed on the site, it's a session, it could be a button click, a form fill. So some are tracked by default, some you can manually set up to trigger in there, and that kind of leads to Google Tag Manager kind of goes hand in hand with Google Analytics, or there's other tag management platforms out there, but Tag Manager is obviously the free solution that a lot of people are using. So there's a lot of capability in there to be able to customize what you set up. Let's see what else. I did appreciate when they got rid of bounce rate, although they kind of sneakily added that back in, but they are kind of pushing towards focusing on engagement, having what's called engagement rate, where that's kind of based on a mix of you've been on the site for a certain amount of time or looked at a certain amount of pages. Another thing that's cool is some of the built-in event tracking. Again, circling back to events, there's certainly, you can go down the rabbit hole of customizing and making it better, but there's some built-in events for everything from external link clicks to like downloading a PDF, scroll activity, video views, things like that. So it's nice to be able to set up some of that out of the box. Again, there's a lot more you can do as you delve into it. The last thing, it was nice when they finally rolled out custom channel groupings again, which again we did have before. It's nice to have that. But even like default, they actually added a paid social channel grouping, which we didn't have before. So again, there's some areas where the interface has taken some getting used to, but it's nice that they do seem to be listening to users on some level and adding more ability to make it your own.
How about you, Brie? What are you loving and why?
Yeah, that was a pretty good roundup there. The event setup, just to hit on that a little bit more. I know we talk about it a lot, but
events.
Events, everything's an event. With that, yeah, I don't know if people remember, but you used to have to go and put another piece of code on your website, and then you had to, come in and say, yes, you have to look for this specific thing happening in analytics. And once that happens, then you can say it's an event. And by the way, if you want it to be a goal, then we have to go describe it again so that you know what it is. And it comes out of the box with enhanced measurement for, link clicks, file downloads, form submissions. That one's still a little finicky, but if you use like an out of the box, like WordPress forms or something like that, like it's going to work. Video engagement, those kinds of things that the majority of sites are going to have to an extent, right? Like out of the box, you have that. You can also create events in the platform based on dimensions and parameters. And then, you can kind of toggle conversions on literally with the click of a button. So all of that's really cool. The nerdy side of me loves the fact that there is built-in anomaly detection that you can control in certain aspects, like in certain places of the platform, which is it statistically significant? I don't know. Well, Google knows, and they built it into the platform, and you don't even have to worry about it now. They'll tell you if there's an anomaly, which is awesome. The customization is really, really cool. I will say, though, that is one of the best and worst things about the platform, because it is so customizable. A lot of times you do have to go in and do some of the customizations in order for it to work for you or your clients, etc. I also just like, how there's definitely debate about this. But I like how in-depth you can get with your data and how like granular, I don't know, I just like the fact that it is a little bit more advanced, honestly, a little bit more advanced than universal analytics. I do understand that that puts up some roadblocks. But I think when you think about analytics platforms in general and their capabilities, right? Universal analytics was still relatively basic. We're getting access to a lot of tools for free, that anomaly detection, machine learning for predictive analytics that we can pull into Google Ads, by the way, which is awesome. There's just a lot of capabilities that we're getting for free that we couldn't have dreamed of getting 10 years ago.
So you said something there that's very interesting, and then I'll get to a couple of points on what I'm excited about. But the idea that GA4 is more advanced than universal analytics, and I think that's worth addressing. One of the reasons I think people have been so slow to adopt GA4, that we are even having this conversation when in theory people should already be on GA4 and have everything backed up, but there are still going to be people that don't have it when this airs, is that it feels scary. And I think there are a lot of resources that even though it's more advanced, it's not scary, because really the only reason why GA4 seems hard is just that it's different. The advanced things are not actually advanced coding or advanced, like you doing something advanced. It's just that it's you have more at your disposal, and it's definitely not harder than it was before. And I think the people that maybe have held back, it's either one of two reasons. Either they're scared, and that's fair, and that's what this is for, and we're here to kind of lift the curtain a little bit and make you feel empowered. Or, and frankly, I think this is a valid reason too, you actually didn't care about your data as much as you thought you did, and you weren't using your data in such a meaningful way. And I think this is going to be a really big accountability moment for a lot of folks, that let's actually see what data we care about, what data we're funneling in, versus what did we want the data just because we wanted the data. One little thing I'll say that I love about GA4 is that it is fostering a lot more love and collaboration between PPC and SEO. I think during the Universal Analytics era, we kind of got comfortable living somewhat separate lives, that, and it's just, oh, Universal Analytics is just going to be different data. It's just going to be different. It's going to be different. GA4 is really forcing us to come together, particularly with the attribution piece, that Google Ads is now allowing that conversion data to come through, even if you are on last click and the last click wasn't a Google ad, it's still at least getting fed into the system. But that also means that we have to check which conversion events we are importing in to Google. And that leads me to, what do we not like? And we'll start with Brie, because we started with Tim last time. Brie, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I started to kind of hit on it, is that, you know, because it is so customizable, you're almost forced to customize things. And by custom, I don't mean like, again, it's not like going in and coding. It's like hitting a button and saying, actually, I want to include this metric, or actually, I want this report to live in the navigation, which, by the way, you can do in Google Analytics 4. That's badass, frankly. Is you can really customize it to yourself. But I think you're right. I think what it does is it makes people that maybe didn't care enough to go in and actually do the work, it makes you have to go and do that work and dig just maybe a little bit deeper. So there's definitely a lot more. I will say there's definitely a lot more going on the front end. One thing I did miss when talking about things I like is that it is a clean slate, right? So that part does stink. We're losing a lot of data. We're starting from zero, right? In case you guys didn't know that, and you're still dragging your feet on GA4, you start from zero. So you will have no data. So it starts from zero, and that's really a bummer. But what it does is it does force you to take a look at, what were we tracking? What did we actually need to track? And you know, now you have to set all of that again. So I think really it's just like the front end work, as far as now we have to get everything set up. Now we have to troubleshoot everything, make sure it works. Now we have to set all of our events up for Google Analytics 4. and customize some things so that we can get to the data that we actually need. I think that's the part that I don't like. And the fact that they didn't come out with a ton of useful resources for people right away. And I think that was also a big turnoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a big turnoff for people too. And forced change with no explanation is really hard to get people on board with. Really hard. And then to not give them resources is just kind of another kick them while they're down kind of situation.
What about you, Tim? I know before this we were talking about I have a bullet list.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of the sentiments Brie brought up, and even to the last point of not providing resources. I can't tell you how many times, in the first few weeks or honestly even months of going into GA4, I want to look at this report. How do I do this? And immediately Googling or turning to social media and finding someone else who's figured it out. But yeah, usually it's not an official Google resource. It's someone else in the industry. So yeah, I think they did a poor job of carrying over cues in the user interface. I think they could have done a better job of, even if they wanted to rebuild everything from the ground up, hey, we're going to rename all your reports. We're going to rename metrics. We're going to have everything organized differently. And especially when analytics can be a tool that you want to put in front of your stakeholders, a marketing director, someone who's not necessarily in the weeds every day. Obviously, someone who knows what they're doing in GA can build out a report in there, or Looker/Data Studio. But it definitely takes a little more work there. Another issue that annoys me, and I'm sure anyone trying to just poke around and get data from the default reports, is what they call thresholding, where what'll happen when you're trying to add a segment or a dimension. Let's say, okay, I'm looking at my landing pages. I want to throw on a segment of everyone that came from paid, and all of a sudden they don't show you anything because it's deemed not significant enough data. So there are some ways around that by making custom explorations reports. But it's something I feel I run into more frequently than I should. So that's definitely a pain point.
So quick shout out for Optmyzr customers. We have a shareable dashboard that does pull in some of those reports and data bits if you put out the scripts. That you can share and export to have pretty reports. But you said something really interesting around the thresholding. And this is actually something that's a grind my gears moment. And it's been a grind my gears moment since data-driven attribution became available to everybody. It seems like we're living in a world of two stories. One story is modeling works for everybody. Jump on board with modeling, just go, just believe, just do it. And then there's another world of, well, actually, you don't have enough data, or this isn't really going to work because you're too small. You don't get enough impressions. You don't spend enough. Whatever the case might be. I'm really curious on both of your takes. How do you feel this kind of new world of attribution, where we're asked to lean into modeling, we're asked to lean into kind of that black box, and while still getting hit with thresholding and kind of having to jerry-rig those solutions? Either one of you can take it.
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, it's definitely more of a black box, especially since they announced they're kind of forcing data-driven attribution. Honestly, we've been running data-driven attribution for a little while, even in Google Ads. So when you have larger subsets of data, I've seen it work well for ad optimization, but it still annoys me. I like being able to compare the various models. So I think it is a concern, especially for smaller businesses that don't have much data built up, and every conversion counts toward making decisions. It does make it more difficult for them. There are some reports kind of tucked away. There's a conversion paths report under the advertising section, and GA4, where you can kind of see the source fit in early on, this one fit on in later on. That can be somewhat helpful. But yeah, it is definitely a concern, and I don't know one that's going to be fully solved. I think another thing to be aware of, though, is our attribution, or even knowing what source any particular visit came from, even in one session. That's not always accurate. Like, the source gets stripped out. So I think sometimes when we do have like a super high level of attribution, that can also become a pain point where we start trusting the data 100%. So I don't know, maybe there's a balance somewhere in between.
Brie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a big thing there at the end. No analytics platform is 100% correct. You're never going to get one-to-one data ever. So let's just put that out there. All analytics platforms are just estimated, kind of to an extent modeled. The big thing, though, that we haven't addressed is that Google Analytics 4 had to come out because of legislation, period. Universal Analytics collected IP addresses. That is not okay. You were not supposed to be able to get access to that information, and you could. The modeling comes out of need because we are entering an era, everything ebbs and flows. We are entering an era where people are relying on cookieless browsing. Devices come with cookieless browsing out of the box. We saw a huge hit from iOS 14.5, right? That modeling is necessary. Otherwise, you're just then you have even less data, because now we're having, well, we couldn't quite figure this one out, so we're just going to scrap it all together. Well, if we do that, we're losing like 50% of all of our traffic, because, you start thinking of Mac users, that's a big portion, Safari users, iPhone, I mean, anybody that uses an Apple product, then we just don't get that. And we don't even want to try and kind of put those pieces together. And thresholding is kind of the same way. So along the lines of thresholding, I know that PPC, when I did PPC, I really enjoyed using like my interest and age and gender, all of those things for targeting, right? It was really, really useful. If you turn on Google Signals in Google Analytics 4, one, it is no longer, to my knowledge, I'm not a privacy expert, I'm not a lawyer, but to my knowledge, it is no longer GDPR compliant. And two, you are going to have thresholding out of the wazoo, because what Google is trying to make sure that you don't do is track certain events back to certain people, right? Or just something where you could narrow it down enough, right? So
this is a really interesting topic that I think a lot of folks are going to want to hear both of your takes on. So there's a question of, is something ethical versus legal versus profitable to do? And Google Signals, I think a lot of people kind of take on board as it is a best practice to turn it on, because then I get that data to come through. I would really love both of your takes on how do you move forward with Google Signals? What advice do you give to folks when they ask you?
I always tell people to consult a privacy expert, and really think about who is coming to their site, who and what you're going to use that information for. Because let's also be honest, they're putting people into boxes. Like, it's a very stereotypical, like, to some extent, yeah, maybe they have your birthday and they can put that in there and say like, oh, you're between 18 and 35. But like, I created my Google account when I was in middle school and I used my dad's birthday. So, and like, I have very like masculine features about me and stuff. So for all I know, they could be like, that's a 40-year-old male. You know what I mean? Like, it's all very stereotypical anyway. The interest things, I mean, everyone's interested in dogs and business to an extent, you know what I mean? Like, so for me, I always tell people, if you actually think that you need it and you're going to use it, you need to consult a privacy expert. I'm not one by any means. And just from a data standpoint, I'm like, if we can do without it, let's please do without it, because we don't need any more thresholding to happen on these reports.
Tim, what about you?
Yeah, I think again, Brie's answer kind of hit it on the head. Or consider your situation, and obviously legal counsel and such. There, it is interesting you point out some of the inaccuracies of interest. I do always find it entertaining looking at various Google profiles I have set up and just how horribly inaccurate sometimes, especially when I was agency side working with a bunch of different industries. I'd have interests lining up with every industry I was researching. But yeah, I mean, there are some useful aspects to it, like supposedly stitching together cross-device better, but it's definitely a give and take. But it really comes down to working with legal counsel on your end. I know there have been a couple of high-profile articles, like in the last year, one organization in particular that actually did get in trouble because of Google Analytics being on their site and what it was tracking. So yeah, just something to be mindful of. Not sure I have a firm answer for any.
I'm going to give a shout out to Rowena Fielding. She is one of the most brilliant privacy experts. Absolutely go check her out. We'll link a couple of resources on her part. And then just one little bit of advice from me, and then we'll move on. I actually have been leaning more and more into native ad platform audiences and targeting, and less into analytics with all of these changes. There's a lot that you can do with custom segments. There's a lot that you can do with creative UTM parameters for content targeting. So just because we can't do it with analytics doesn't mean we can't be the PPC rock stars that we know that we can be. And we also can be above board ethically and profitably. Like it doesn't have to be in if this or that. Cool. So there was a really good question that actually came from Joey Binder that I would love both of your takes on. What are the features of GA4 that you're using for PPC? I guess we'll start with Tim.
Sure. I think the biggest and most useful immediate feature that comes to mind is the audience capabilities. Obviously, we've had the ability to create audiences to sync to Google Ads for quite a while in Universal Analytics, but just how much more advanced that is when you can tie it to, okay, I've created an event for people that click a button to find a location, or I've reached this stage of the sign up process, and then you can literally just select that I want to make this an audience. So just playing around with various combinations, you can tie together, like this person took this step, they went to this page and completed this action afterwards, and then bucket them in an audience after that. So yeah, I would say that would be the biggest use case. And again, besides that, like, the typical conversion import and that sort of thing.
What about you, Brie?
Yeah, that the audiences is a big one, especially if you have a bigger business, specifically like our ecom folks. You get access to predictive analytics and predictive audiences as well. So it can say 7-day likely churners, 7-day likely buyers, 14-day and 28-day as well. So that's big. You can pull that straight into Google Ads. Yeah, and then you can also create like a list of events, like people that abandon cart. You can create an audience for that and start targeting them. But also, I think there are some really cool metrics that we get access to for our Google Ads reports in Google Analytics for first-time purchasers, like average daily purchase, like a whole bunch of new metrics, and you can put up to 15 of them in your report, your Google Ads report. I think that's, personally, to me, that's really cool. So yeah, but I think really the biggest thing with Google Analytics 4 are those audiences, man. Like that's pretty awesome.
The audiences are fantastic, as is being able to see the events and kind of almost mapping out what your primary and secondary conversion actions should be in Google. I mean, Microsoft ads, Meta ads, LinkedIn ads, all the ad channels. Like this is GA4 has utility too, and I know that we're focusing quite a bit on Google. And that actually leads to my next question before we dive into kind of the walkthrough of the GA4 setup. It was a really good question from Ivan Votvik. I apologize if I mispronounced that. What are your thoughts on Google shifting the strategy to making GA4 a sort of central hub for web marketers? So attribution changes, integration for Google Optmyzr, things like that.
Well, Google Optmyzr is going away, so that's a bummer. But I see what you're saying. Yeah. So I think that this is really important. And I think it's starting to get a lot of clients to kind of understand that, again, there is an in-between, right? So Facebook is going to say something different from Google. It's going to say something different from Google Ads. It's going to say something different from, whatever. But you kind of want to have one platform where you can go to and say, all right, on average, where do these things land? And I think we hit on a little bit under the advertising section, which why did they call it advertising instead of attribution? Don't know. But in that advertising section, you do get those conversion paths and you see how many touch points it takes and what are the early touch points and what are the late touch points. And I think that's so important and it's been overlooked for so long. We did have that capability in Universal Analytics with multi-touch funnels. People just didn't really use it that much, but it's so important to get a full understanding because your overall marketing strategy is made up of a lot of different tactics and puzzle pieces, and taking one puzzle piece out can ruin the rest of your like you might say, well, we're not seeing Facebook as a last touch conversion. There's none of those, right? But if everybody goes to our Facebook page to validate that we are indeed real and see all of the social proof, and we take that out, then now we're not getting conversions, right? So I think that's it's just showing people like, hey, we need to be looking at the full picture, and I think that's really important.
All right, you, Tim.
Yeah, I would, again, basically, I agree with everything that was said there. It does have capabilities to kind of serve as that front and center place to look at everything. There is maybe sometimes a tiny bit of a skeptic in me, like, okay, Google owns ads. They also own analytics. So maybe I have other sources to compare. But again, always comparing ad platform versus their. I do like, they have metrics, like even being able to see like first session activity versus the current session to kind of track that path through. And it would just also add just making sure that your UTM parameter approach follows a consistent scheme, because that's really going to help you make sure that everything's bucketed properly and that you can actually compare sources properly in the interface.
And I think what we will see in GA4, and then we'll transition to Brie's beautiful walkthrough of GA4 setup, is we'll actually probably see a lot of what happened in Google Ads, where if a thing wasn't highly utilized, it will get deprecated. And I think that the things that we're going to have access to now, kind of during still that rollout before everyone's fully on it, we might start to see some of those things go away and be replaced. We might start to see some of them consolidated, because at the end of the day, Google is really, really good at doing a few things exceptionally well or a lot of things averagely. And typically we're happier when it's the few things done really well. So I would expect eventually more plugins for some of their other ad tools like local service ads, but I'd also probably expect quite a more integrations to pull in other ad platforms, but maybe deprecate some other functionality. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. Now, as we go through, oh yes, one last question. And we can actually talk about this as we go through the setup of what should people do with their old data. Is this data that just gets stored? Is it something that you just kind of hold on to, like your third grade projects in your mom's house? Like what do we do with our old data?
Yeah, so Google actually announced yesterday, so today is the 28th. Google announced yesterday that July 1st, 2024 is when we will lose our universal analytics data. That being said, it won't be like my college notebooks that are still in my closet. For what reason? Because I think that I'm going to go back and learn marketing statistics
Definitely.
again.
Definitely.
Absolutely not. I didn't enjoy it while I was doing it, but alas. So we'll only get it for a year. That being said, if you were someone that used Universal Analytics for 10 years, right? Because it's been around for that long. If you were someone that used Universal Analytics and you used it well for 10 years and you're like, wow, this data is really important and really useful, I would suggest going ahead and just exporting all that data and putting it somewhere. I know
Any
a lot of people,
suggestions for where to put it?
I mean, a lot of people are putting it into BigQuery, which is nerve-wracking for a lot of people. Like I don't really even work in BigQuery all that much. I store stuff there, but it's kind of like that closet with my marketing notebooks. Or, depending on how much data you have, there are Google Sheets extensions. You can dump a bunch of data that way. That's how I do it for most of my clients. But if you have 10 years worth of data, that's not going to work because you're going to need more storage than that. But yeah, I would say just go ahead and dump it. And if you need it, you can use it in Looker Studio in the future or Power BI, whatever you're using to visualize your data.
What about you, Tim? Any suggestions while Brie gets ready to share?
Yeah, I'll add the caveat that even the way GA4 measures basic metrics like sessions is different. So it's never going to be apples to apples comparison if you're looking at before and after. But yeah, as mentioned, BigQuery is a popular option where you can literally just go to reports and there's some limitations with amount of data, but you can export Excel files full of data. So yeah, maybe looking back a year or two may be more relevant than several years. Again, there may be some people where that super historical data may be helpful as so much has changed in that time frame.
And I will put one last reminder for calm and kindness to yourself that you do not need to stress about the data. At the end of the day, it was a tool to work through what was going on. We now will have a different tool to work through what's going on. If you truly need that data, you wouldn't find the session valuable because you've already backed it up. You already have your plan set. For everyone who's watching that hasn't sorted this yet, honestly, that data, you probably weren't even using it. So it's not worth stressing over. It's not worth crying over. Let's Mary Kondo it and just choose what sparks joy. And with that, Brie, do you want to kick us off on the most crucial things to think about with setting up that GA4 account?
Absolutely. I am going to quote one of my favorite bands, and the song that I always walk out to is All the Small Things by Blink 182. In this section, so your admin section, when you set up Google Analytics 4, it is all about all the small things here because there's a lot of nitty gritty that happens in here. There are a lot of things to touch, and I encourage you to touch them all because there are a lot of you'll see a lot of hidden gems, one might say. So this setup assistant, you can go through it if you want. Some of it's not really. I don't use it. Some people. Do you guys use it? Do you use the setup assistant? It's kind of just like a checklist.
I use it now for my more SMB clients just to help them kind of visualize what we're doing. It's for the more enterprise level folks, but I actually find that this is a very helpful kind of sanity check of, okay, this is this step, we've completed it. It's this step, we've completed it. But it's not like you have to, as you say.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Same for me. There's a couple places when we were transitioning through where it's like, okay, that's kind of useful. They called this out, but yeah, not to make it or break it.
Yeah, I will say, this says, hey, by the way, go ahead and turn Google Signals on.
Yeah.
for me, it's just, this is a very risky place for people to be sometimes. So just something to take into consideration. If you're like, what do I do? This is a good place to start. But just kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's more just a checklist in case you guys were wondering. The property settings, this is important. Make sure your time zone's correct, because if you have Meta reporting on one time zone and this reporting on another, it's going to even be even more off. So that's where this happens. And some of this stuff you're going to see as you set up your first data stream, which we'll talk about in a second. Actually, yeah, we can just skip property management. So yeah, we'll go into data stream. So your data stream, this is how data gets into Google Analytics 4, right? And the cool thing we didn't talk about is in Universal Analytics, we had web plus app properties. And by default, all GA4 properties are essentially that. So you have your website here. You can add apps. You can even add multiple websites if you want. That's not necessarily like suggested, but you could do it. So if you go into this data stream, so this is, again, how you're going to set up your Google Analytics for like getting data into it. We use this measurement ID. See, there's this wonderful G dash whatever, which is new. But you can also get your, there's like the tag instructions and stuff on here. This is that enhanced measurement we talked about. So you can see these are all things that are tracked by default. So page views, scrolls, outbound clicks, site search, video engagement, and file downloads. By default now, these form interactions are off. If you wanted to turn them on, you just hit that little setting and you can turn any of these on or off. Then you can create events in here if you want. The big thing though is to come into this section, the Google tag, right? A lot of people don't really ever look at this. If you go into configure tag settings in here, it's going to show you this stuff. I don't know, it's just a pretty graphic. But under the settings, show all. These are all things that are really important and people ask about a lot and can never find. And that's because it's 4 layers deep, right? And you have to know which buttons to click to get there. So cross-domain tracking happens right here. Configure your cross-domain tracking here. And then
I'm going to interject real quick. For those of you in the PPC world that have to deal with subdomains versus main domains, this is really, really critical that you have set up, especially if you're forced to use a vanity domain, because God forbid that's not configured and it's not tracked. You're going to be very sad explaining that nothing happened that SEO can report, but you're showing all this beautiful data. So definitely this is really, really, really important on the PPC side.
Yeah, this is huge. And so many people overlook it because it's, again, buried. But yeah, your cross-domain tracking, and it's a lot easier, again, than it was in Universal Analytics. So, but definitely make sure you have this, this going on. And then another one is your unwanted referrals. So this is especially important for people that are using payment gateways. So the Stripes, the PayPals of the world, you can list those unwanted referrers here. Some people are still doing the defined internal traffic with IP addresses. Most people are using VPNs or are working at home and in their office. So it's not overly helpful, but if you have a client ask for it, or if you all want it in general, it is right here. That's one that I get asked about a lot as well. So this is definitely important. So again, that's under you're going to come into your data stream, go into configure tag settings, and all of this is under your settings right here. So very important. Your events. So in here, this will show you all the events that are coming through, which is nice. It's a really nice, like, quick check. Like, what are all of my events coming through? You can see them right here. You can also create and modify events in here. So again, we were talking about, you can create events based on different parameters. So once I get rid of this, it'll show you all the parameters you have access to, right? So for quick things, that's nice. Real
quick, just as a general shout out for folks, when you're first setting this up, the data will not populate. So do not stress if you see zeros here. it's going to take like a day or two to start flowing. If it's a week, then yeah, something's not right. But a day or two, just give it a moment to populate.
Yeah, for some reason it takes usually like at least 16 hours. So I don't know why that happens. Well, I guess I do know how it happens. It has to do with how Google, but it's very technical and boring. So we're not going to go there. But yes, give it some time, and then your events will come through here. And then also we were talking about those conversions. You literally just go, yep, that's a conversion, turn it on. Or no, file downloads aren't a conversion. You turn it off, and now it's not considered a conversion anymore. Super easy peasy, which we love. We love easy peasy. The audiences. So audiences live right here. You can see I've created some. But yeah, you even have templates for some, which is, again, great. So like non-purchasers or e-com people, you don't even have to create it. It's just right here. So these are general templates, and then you can kind of go through here. There's predictive. It'll tell you whether or not they're eligible. But you can create your audiences in here.
So for folks wondering at home, what is a typical size where you'll start to see the predictive audiences turn on?
Yeah, so you have to have 1,000 events a day.
So does that mean people should be forcing the 1,000 events per day, or does that mean that they should organically reach the 1,000 events per day?
That means you should organically reach them. And really those two, like it's one of those, it's another Google tool, right? So that's based off of machine learning and all that stuff. But we can create a lot of the audiences that we want, like people that have added something to a cart, but they didn't actually purchase. Like we can create that right here, super easy. You just click, add to cart. This isn't an e-commerce site, but like add to cart, but exclude the people that have actually purchased in the last 30 days. You can come in and create those. So I don't want you to feel like the predictive analytics, like you have to have them, or the predictive audiences. You can create just about any audience you want to here. It's just not going to say based on all these different data points, whatever. And even if they did, you could still, in theory, I guess, create it here if you wanted to. I will say this is really nice number of users in the audience, because you still do have, like, yes, these will go into Google Ads, but you still have the same, you can only market to an audience size that's big enough, right? You kind of have that same limitation with, at least to my understanding, you still have that same limitation. If you're pulling through a GA4 audience, you still have to hit a certain number of users to be able to run those ads, I believe.
Yes.
Have you all experienced any pushback on that, like small audiences?
Well, so that's kind of where my question about data-driven attribution and modeling came from, is that I have found that there's a certain cohort of brands that are almost never going to have a reasonable sized audience. Like it's always going to hit the thresholding issue. Whereas there are other folks that they could come up with a super particular segment and it'll still be a viable audience. So where I would suggest folks maybe brainstorm in the interim, at least on the advertising side. Organically, I'm sorry, this is not going to help you. But on the paid side, using broad match actually layers in audiences. And yes, you are trust falling into Google and into Microsoft, but we'll have those audiences baked in. Additionally, using smart bidding, we'll layer in those audiences. The other thing that I find very helpful if you don't have the actual people is using the custom segments and going after websites of, say, your competitors along with the terms that you think your ideal persona would search. So even if you can't have the actual people based off of your site, you can take advantage of your competitors and build audiences that way until you get to the point that you can, yes, build off of that. But this is, again, using a Google Ads audience to amplify yourself to the point that you can then use a GA4 audience as opposed to importing a GA4 audience into Google Ads.
Yeah, and I'd add that even if you technically can target it, even if it is like a really tiny audience, you're probably not going to get much traction off of it. So you definitely want to consider that as well. I think the current threshold is at 100 in Google Ads. The platform's mixed up there, but yeah.
Yeah, one of them's 100 and one of them's 1,000, and I can't remember which is which.
So
But
you
yeah,
need
so
1,000 people to serve.
Thinking of Facebook. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this will give you like an idea of how many people fall into this bucket. So I think that's really nice too. So you can get a little bit of an idea as you create the audiences, and then when you come back in and check in on them, how they're doing. So this is that audience builder, like Tim was talking about, absolutely phenomenal, which is really, and it's really, really helpful. Another big one. So under this data collection, here is your channel groupings that Tim shouted out. You can create your new one. You can edit this one. Well, no, you can't. You can copy it and then edit it. But, well, yeah.
Well, this is actually an interesting question. Do you recommend that people copy to modify, or do you recommend that they start fresh?
I think personally, I think it depends on how you want to report on channels. And like I have some clients that are just like, we just want to replicate what was over in my universal analytics, and they've completely changed it. So I'm like, all right, we're just going to do one from scratch because it's a lot easier. But I mean, I don't really have a preference. Tim, do you?
Yeah, no, again, yeah, I would say it would depend on the site. This is where I'll come back to what I mentioned earlier, though, about this is where UTM structure matters, because you're going to use like your mediums here in particular, most likely to define which buckets your sources fall into.
Yeah. So under data settings and data collection, so by default, Google Signals is turned off. If you do decide that it's right for your organization to come in and turn it on, you can come into this data settings, data collection, and turn this on. It is regional as well. So you could always, if you're like, well, I want it at least just for the US, you could hit this disallow all and just turn it on for the US. So that's always one way you can do it. You're going to hit more thresholding problems with that, though, more than likely. So just something to keep in mind. The big thing under this data settings, though, is this data retention. So by default, the data retention is for 2 months. You more than likely want to change this to 14 months. And what this does, so it's not saying that after 2 months you're losing all of your data. Nope, that's not the case. What it's saying is you can't add, like, so Tim was saying, if you use any of the reports in the out of the box reporting section, you can see I've customized a lot of things in here, all weird. But if you use any of the out of box reports, those are going to be fine after 14 months. You're not going to run into an issue. It's when you start adding in secondary dimensions, when you start meshing together user and event data, that you're going to run into an issue. If you go into Explore, you're not going to be able to create explorations for more than 2 months back. So definitely change this over to 14 months so that you have as much data as you possibly can and a much autonomy over that as you want. Also in here, we have our attribution settings. So we've talked about attribution a lot. These are the default cross-channel data driven. You can change them in 7-day and 90-day, 90 days for conversions, or 30 days for acquisition and 90 days for conversion. And then all of your linking happens in here as well. So your Google Ads, BigQuery, I know we talked about that a little bit. A lot of people aren't in love with how GA4 is, like what you have access to in GA4 as far as like how you can visualize things. So a lot of people are dumping everything into BigQuery, which isn't terribly hard, I guess. Like it could be done in theory and done in like 15 minutes. Even if you don't have a BigQuery account yet, it could be done that quickly. But honestly, then I just pull things into Looker Studio. But you also can pull in Merchant Center, Optmyzr until it goes away, and Search Console, 360 ads, the gamut is all in here. So definitely make sure you go in and add all of those as soon as possible. Now, this is all the setup, right? So this is all, how do I lay my foundation? I do want to go over one more thing that's really, really important for PPCers, if that's okay.
Oh, please.
Okay. So fun fact, in your reports section, like I said, this is, can I go to the demo account in here? Okay. So in your reports section, you're never going to find, like, there's no Google Ads report in here. Like, where the heck did it go? I don't know. And even if you go into acquisition, you can see, your paid search come in here, but you can't like click into it and see how much you spent or whatever. The only place you're going to find that information is under acquisition overview. There's this little card at the bottom that says sessions by Google Ads campaigns. And if you click on the view Google Ads campaigns, it's going to pull open this Google Ads report that we were used to seeing. This is the only place you can get to it out of the box. And this is where you're seeing your Google Ads clicks, cost per conversion, ROAS, all that stuff, which is great. This is all the information that we're looking for. Now, I'm going to go back to this one so you can see if you want to. Remember, Google Analytics 4 is highly customizable. So if you go into your acquisition overview and open that report up, you can hit the pencil in the top right-hand corner and just save this as a new report. Just call it, I'm just going to call it Google Ads, save, and then we're going to go back and it says it was saved in the library. So once you're in the reports, hold on, I have to refresh this. I've gone back and forth between my accounts too much. Once you're in that report section, the library is down here. And I'm really not trying to get too like technical, but this is going to make your life so much easier. You can see that this is what makes up your navigation, right? So I would just go into the life cycle, hit edit collection, look for your Google Ads here and drop it into your acquisition. And now when you save it, save to current collection, once you go to the navigation, your Google Ads report is going to be in the navigation. That makes life so much easier for all of our Google Ads folks because you don't have to go into overview every single time. So.
And it's worth noting that you can do this for other types of reports as well. So It's not just limited to Google Ads, but this is one of those things that if you need that quality of life, 100%, it's worth investing the 5 minutes at the onset than the several hours that you'll invest over time being frustrated and trying to find it, like where to go. So
yeah, so I did the same thing. Because all that is there's just a filter on all that data. So I did the same thing for Facebook. Up here I can see all my Facebook. I just took all these reports and put the filter over them, and now I have all my Facebook reports in their own collection in here. Do I actually use this? No, it was just for a demo, but alas, it is still there. You can still do it.
And one last thing before we wrap up, cards are kind of how to think about GA4 in terms of visualization. So definitely be empowered to get in and play, as Brie mentioned, and adjust the settings as you need. I will say there are some cards that are probably more useful than others. So for example, the geo card and being able to see that change. The retention one is really, really helpful. But if all else fails, just go in and spend maybe an hour acquainting yourself with what's available out of the box, because it's definitely going to be very helpful. So we're now at the bit where everyone gets to share their kind of final thoughts, and then you guys get to hear about where to connect with Brie, where to connect with Tim. So Tim, do you want to go first on kind of what's your main takeaway for GA4? What's one thing people should do or think about?
Sure. I think what I'd encourage people to do in process of learning to build out GA4 is also to dig into Google Tag Manager, because that's kind of a one-stop shop. You get the Google Tag Manager code in your site. It makes your life a lot easier in both deploying the GA4 code and being able to fire events for specific actions on your site.
How about you, Brie?
Yeah, I think my big thing is just like get messy, be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Like spend the time, even if it's just like once a week going, okay, I'm going to try and find the how many people landed on this page from Google Ads, right? And give yourself a challenge once a week, try and figure it out, find it, or give yourself a challenge to create a report a week, whatever that looks like for you. Just really start getting messy with it and know that you're not alone. There are tons of people out there. Actually, everyone is going through the exact same thing right now. We all have to get to Google Analytics 4. We all have pain points. And then find some people that you can kind of collaborate with. There are a lot of communities out there, PPC chat, that all sorts of places that you can go to kind of get help, like Tim was saying. The GA4 documentation from Google itself is kind of slim still, but there are tons of people out there that are talking about GA4 every single day. And so find your community and get messy.
And I'll just add, because that was fantastic, both of you. GA4 at the end of the day is just a tool to help us track the things that we care about. So don't compare yourself to what other people are doing. They have different business needs. I forget who said it, but someone, when talking about GA4, talked about how GA4 basically lets us set up analytics for our business, whereas Universal Analytics was very much cookie cutter, turnkey, one size fits all. We can have what we need. I'm going to mute myself. But this is basically a good time to really take stock of the data that you need. So we were incredibly blessed to have both Brie and Tim. Tim, where can folks find you? How can people connect if they want to learn more from you?
Sure. Either Twitter or LinkedIn are probably the best places. Profile is Timothy J. Jensen, or you can just search for my name on either.
And Brie, how about you?
Yeah, so I put out tutorials and stuff on YouTube and TikTok and Twitter. Just Google Brie E. Anderson and all that stuff comes up. I'm also, shameless plug here, revamping my Google Analytics 4 course. So that will be available to people too. But I'm always happy. Shoot me a tweet, shoot me a message on TikTok or wherever you find me if you have something specific that you're trying to find. Because at the end of the day, even if I don't know how to find it, I am a nerd and will be intrigued on figuring out how to figure it out. So more than happy to talk to anyone.
And Optmyzr is always happy to have both of you back. This was incredibly helpful and useful. So hope you all got a lot of value out of this session. If you have any questions, absolutely hit these two up. They are fantastic. I also strongly encourage you to check out PPC Chat, check out Foxwell Founders, check out the Paid Search Association. There's going to be a number of sessions coming out. This session is here to help. We'll be linking a bunch of resources, so you are not alone. And we thank you for investing this time with us as you learn and grow and get better with GA4.